And we're back. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from the office, North Georgia's only live online morning show. I'm joined now by Chief Edward Lacey, the City of Ellijay Police Chief Edward Lacey, and he has just returned from Israel after an intensive 2 weeks of public safety and counterterrorism training with the country's top policing executives. Chief Lacey, glad to have you this morning.
Good
How are
morning.
you?
Thanks for having me.
20 members went over to Israel for this training, and we talked the other day. I want to start out, how do you in Ellijay, I mean, how do you get picked to go with this delegation to Israel?
Well, it's an extensive application process. This is actually the third time that I had been, that I had applied for the program. I started in the early 2000s applying for it. I had been selected as an alternate at one time. I had to decline to go because I was involved in a major investigation down in Fulton County, and I had to decline to go to that one. And then this year I was finally selected and got to go. So it was an honor to be able to do that.
Before we get into exactly what the trip was about and what the training, what was involved in the training, why have you always been so interested in this particular trip with this training here?
I felt like that personally I have to continue to seek to make myself better, to stay at the top of the edge of my game as far as law enforcement. And I believe that this is one of the programs that is unique nationwide. I believe that the people that we visited over there are at the top of their game, and we have so much to learn from them. And I just wanted to be a part of it. I just had heard a lot about it since around 96. I learned around in 96 about it from a guy named Brad Pope that was the chief of police in Canton. Later became an investigator with the Police Officer Standards and Training Council. Had learned about it from him. Heard his stories and everything that it was, and they don't publicize this program very, very much because of security issues and those type of things. And so, you know, I heard about it through word of mouth, but then I started following it, studying on it, found out that it was really something I wanted to be a part of.
Okay, now let's talk about the training itself. Counterterrorism. The other day when I talked to you briefly, you said it was much more than just counterterrorism training. What was the training? How was it laid out? And I mean, what do you feel you accomplished in some of the classes and things that you went through?
Well, so what was it? What was the training? It was much more than just counterterrorism, because in Israel they're not only just worrying about counterterrorism, they're also worrying about maintaining their everyday average society, their civil policing efforts, their community-oriented policing efforts, but it's at two extremes. They're doing that when there's this high risk of terrorism, but also they're doing it in a what we would call, especially compared to us, extremely diverse, ethnically, religiously. The police have to really be able to really be on the cutting edge to be able to be effective in that type of diversity, where you have so many people where it's Arabs or Druze or Jews or Coptics or Catholics, or they've got 70 different countries represented in the Israel, and each police area has different challenges. Because of the different makeup of the communities. So, for instance, we would go up into, Kiryat Shimona, which is close to Lebanon, and would receive a briefing from their counter-drug unit. And they would talk to us about how they did border control and how they would do counter-drug investigations, and then took us actually out on the border of Lebanon to show us the things that they had put in place and demonstrated their techniques for us. So that's how the 2 weeks went. We would go into an area where it'd be like Haifa. We would go to Haifa, and they have close to 300,000 people living in Haifa. It's a port city on the Mediterranean. and they have this, again, religiously diverse community. We in America don't realize how the Israeli government really wants to be a melting pot. For instance, they had just completed a celebration of a gay pride week in that city, and we in America normally wouldn't think of Israel being that diverse.
I hear you.
So we would go in there to Haifa, met the mayor. We would look at their structure of their police organizations. We could receive briefings from their superintendent, and then we would go out to places such as the Baha'i Center, and we would go in behind the scenes to see the security measures that are in place at the Baha'i Center that people don't really realize are even there. So we went into the Golan. We went to the tri-border of Syria and Jordan. It seemed like every time we would leave someplace, or just before we went someplace, there was a major incident. We heard immediately after we left the area in the Golan, the very next day we heard on the news where Israel had reacted to issues on the Syrian border, where some rebels had been fighting with each other, and a couple of mortar rounds had come into Israel, and they actually destroyed some of their tanks and those kind of things. That was the day after we left. And the day before we went to Old City, Jerusalem, we received a briefing on the new wave of terrorism, the new methods of terrorism. One of those new methods would be what they're calling a lone wolf type attack. We think of suicide bombers,
right,
with
exactly.
these type of things. And so that's because that state-sponsored terrorism, ISIS, Hezbollah, Hamas, whoever, recruits somebody, they train them, they outfit them with suicide vests, all of these things. There's a lot of moving parts in that organization, and their security network was able to interrupt that process so often that they had to change their methods. And so now they're looking more at a lone wolf type attack, which is an individual who's going to receive, he or his family are going to receive compensation after the attack that he's able to perform. One of those methods is just stabbing someone in a public area, mainly a police officer. So we were in downtown Jerusalem. The day before we were in downtown Jerusalem, 3 police officers were attacked. One was killed. She was stabbed in the neck. And this was the day after we received this briefing on the new wave of terrorism. And so we found ourselves thinking, how long is it going to be before we see this type of change in America? Well, the very next day in Dearborn, Michigan,
exactly,
there was a police officer stabbed in the neck, and we don't place the connection to that terrorism. That person is, his family, if he's arrested, he's going to receive $2,000 a month U.S. for the rest of his life. If he's killed, he's going to receive $3,000. And if someone does that attack in Jerusalem, in the holy city, then they're going to receive additional monies, and all this money is coming in from Gulf states, other Arab nations.
State-sponsored terrorism. If we can stop the state-sponsored money, where, like you said, where if somebody goes through with an attack and they're what they call successful, their family gets payments every month, and that just doesn't come out of the clear blue sky.
Right.
I want to back up on something, because so many things you said there, that had to be pretty intense to see what they're under. Not that our law enforcement, and by no disrespect, that our law enforcement does not deal on a day-to-day basis with many things that come their way, and you have to be up on the new terroristic organizations, the way they're organizing, but the intensity over there has to be just through the roof. I mean, it has to be intense all the time. I mean,
that's one way you could describe our program. It was nonstop. We were able to do a few things that were what we would consider touristy, but I missed out on most of the tourist activities that we would, because it was just so intense. We were just nonstop, go, go, go. And what we learned is that the things that we deal with as police officers over here, for instance, we have this thing called hypervigilance, where police officers are on they're at a heightened state of awareness for long periods of time. And police are not the only ones that experience this, but we, compared to what they're doing in Israel and what's happening to those guys in Israel, ours doesn't compare to them. For instance, when we were walking around in the old city, we had a group of 20 of us, but we had 2 border guard police officers in the front and 2 border guard police officers in the back, and we were escorted everywhere we went. And you would think that that would make it look like more of a target because there's a group being escorted, but these people were able to blend in such a way, and as they moved, I watched how they moved and took us through the area, and it was as if they weren't even with us. Someone would just have seen a group walking through Old City. But it's interesting to see how they have 2 doctrines. You have your civil police doctrine, and then you have your military type doctrine. And so they have in their minds, they're able to do both. They're able to do your civilian policing, thefts, burglaries, robberies, domestic violence, the same way that we would, but then yet again, instantly in a moment, flip a switch into a military type doctrine or philosophy when there's a terrorist attack.
What was the most interesting or part of the training that you really gravitated to? What did you enjoy the most in the training that you just, the takeaway was just
one of the things
in your career, because you have been in law enforcement for quite some time?
Well, I've been in training. I really believe in training. I'm a trainer myself, and I believe in the value of it. Their academies were phenomenal. They had cities that were built that were about the size of, maybe even larger than downtown LJ. Vacant buildings, police stations, banks, malls, the city streets had parked cars, they had signs, fire hydrants, everything that you could imagine, and that's where their initial police officers did their training. Realistic.
So it wasn't. It was real simulation.
It was a mock city, but it was a real city.
I mean,
and then when we went to the ISA or Shin Bet, the Israeli security agency, and we were able to see how they prepared for dignitary visits, such as the city was still set up from President Trump's visit to Israel.
Right.
And so 30 days before a visit of that magnitude, the Pope or whoever, they set these cities up with they can change the cityscapes, the storefronts and those type of things by using large tarpaulins that are printed to look like different buildings and different streetscapes, and but they don't just do training like when we experience a very bad incident, and I'll use Columbine for instance.
Right.
Columbine is something that changed our tactical approach to a serious incident. We changed our doctrine. We changed, and it took a year or more to kind of move in a new direction. They do it instantly. When that shooting happened, or the stabbing happened in Old City, Jerusalem, they instantly sent not just an investigation team, but also behind it, they sent with them a training team. And they analyzed the entire incident, developed a training program, and within 24 to 48 hours had a new training regime that they had sent out to all of their police in the whole nation to overcome any deficiencies that led up to that. So whereas we would do an after-action review, it might take 30 to 60 days to compile all of that information. It might take another couple of months to put out lesson plans and put out all that training. They're doing it during the event. They're training during events and not waiting until after. So I would say that their approach and their seriousness in approaching training was probably the biggest takeaway that I had.
Let me bring it home just a little bit before we end this morning, because our time is limited. you know, we hear Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly, and we hear comments like the chatter and you wouldn't sleep at night if you really knew all the things that were the chatter that they pick up about terrorism and possible threats. And I call it the rural America. I always say rural America needs to prepare, because I call it the it could never happen here area that everybody thinks it could never happen here. But I, for one, believe we need to be always prepared. What was the takeaway from there that you maybe can bring back and apply here with your officers and in this particular area? What is something that maybe
you mean specifically to terrorism, or
any of the training that you brought back there, maybe terrorism? Because I think some days I say, you know what, it can be difficult because we never want to lose our small town feel. We don't want to lose our freedom to come and go. We have we have these awesome, great community parades that remind us that we live in small town America, but you have to, you know, just like the switch you said earlier, you have to police it, even though we're in LJ, Georgia, as, you know, community police, and then switch, and you know what I'm saying?
I would say this. Let's take just one city, for instance, and I'll move down to Eilat on the Gulf of Aqaba. You know, they have 100 hotels with 500,000 beds. All of Israel is very, like I said, very diverse, but you have mainly Jewish people and Arab people. But when everyone comes into Eilat, because it is a vacation city, it's right on the Gulf of Aqaba, and so everybody's coming there to have fun. And so you have all of these Muslims, all of the Druze, all of these different religious types coming in, and then also all of the ethnic types coming in. And then they leave. And so they're coming in and they're leaving. So it's tourism. And I would say that on a very, very smaller scale, here in LJ, we want to maintain that small town feel, and we always want to be the LJ that I've known my whole life. Right. And yet we want to stay safe. And what we got to realize is that if it were just for the people that live in LJ and just for the people that live in our community being here, and that's the only people that were ever here, then it would be a whole lot easier. But it's not. We're importing stuff at times. And we have to know how to understand what it is that's coming in, and how to deal with that, and how to deal with it in a way so as not to infringe upon the liberty and infringe upon the liberty of others, but also how to keep safe. And that is a balance, and they do it very well. Watching how they manage their oversight of security issues, but also keep an environment where it is very open to tourism, very open to very large, diverse groups of people, and seeing how they balance that. That's one of the takeaways that I feel is very applicable to what we do here. It has nothing to do with terrorism. It has to do with police operations and philosophy. And how they're able to stay fluid and not stay static.
I could agree with that, because how to balance it is, I see that, because, you know, there's cities in America and large population pockets that their focus all day long is a certain way. But here when you have an area like LJ in North Georgia, where we get a lot of people visit, you have to bring a balance to it. Mm-hmm. And I could agree with that. That was a delegation of 20-member delegation of senior law enforcement officers. Is that yearly? Do they do that every year?
They do it every year. And then there's also a program where they bring Israeli police officers over to Georgia. And so it's an exchange program. And so we're exchanging information both directions. It started leading up to the Olympics in Atlanta, and to prevent some of the previous events of terrorism, the City of Atlanta Police sent a delegation to Israel to learn from them, and then brought them over. And so several years leading up to the 96 Olympics, they did this exchange back and forth, and it was a cooperative effort between public and private entities. So for me, it was an all expense paid, sponsored. It didn't cost me a dime to go. Didn't cost the city any money to go. The only thing they had to do was pay for my salary while I was in training. And so that's how it got its start.
Something about going to Israel for counterterrorism training. I don't see that as. I see that as a good investment any day.
It was phenomenal, and we really hope to take. I'm still trying to digest a lot of the information, and I took extensive notes. Copies of all the presentations that we received. Over 60 hours of training, actual training. In that 2-week period of time, we did spent a lot of time traveling from area to area, and but if I can take that information and apply it, just one small part.
Is it the kind of training that you were able to? Obviously, it's the kind of training you were able to come back and start doing some in-house training with your men and women over.
Yes.
You've already started working on some things, and
yes, sir.
That's great.
And the connections too. For instance, one of the people that we met with was the Israeli defense minister. He hosted us. We were able to go through the Ministry of Defense, through the whole. We were able to visit with the people who do the security for all the embassies. Actually, spoke with live the consulate in Atlanta, those type of things, and they remember us. And so he is a former ambassador to Israel, and what people don't realize is he was the ambassador to the United States from Israel, but he's an Arab, and he's fixing to come over to Atlanta and be a visiting professor for several years at Emory. So it's a very, very small world, and we have a lot of connections if we just make them.
Well, Chief, we appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming by this morning. My guest has been City of Ellijay Police Chief Edward Lacey, and we've been talking about counterterrorism, a trip to Israel. Very interesting. We can find our segments on our YouTube channel and on FetchYourNews.com. They'll be on there this afternoon. That is Fetch Your News, FYN TV, and also on FetchYourNews.com under our community section. Again, Chief, thank you very much. When we come back after these messages, you never know. I might talk a little more politics, a little more health care talk. You never know with me. Maybe I'm going to venture into the governor's race of the state of Georgia. I'm your host, BKP. We'll be back right after these messages.
Ace is your helpful place for paint and home goods, tools, outdoor living, and lawn equipment. But did you know Ace Hardware of Blue Ridge is a little bit more? We have hunting rifles and accessories for your next hunting trip. We have Amish furniture imported directly from Ohio. And we have Ace Custom Woodworks for all your custom wood project needs, from cabinets to artwork. Ace Hardware of Blue Ridge, we have your new house in stock.
Circuit World, brand name merchandise at unbelievably low prices. Furniture, appliances, and electronics. Circuit World is locally owned and operated, serving the tri-state area. Circuit World has highly trained professionals to help. Visit your hometown Circuit World today. 3 locations in Georgia: Ellijay, Blue Ridge, and Blairsville, Franklin, and Murphy, North Carolina. No credit checks, so let Circuit World deliver to you today.
El Rey in Ellijay.
El Rey Mexican Restaurant.
Family owned and operated, and a local favorite for families, parties, and meetings.
Great prices.
Friendly service and delicious Mexican cuisine.
Patio dining available.
Come sing in Carlos's Cantina every Friday 9 to 1.
Eat in or take away.
Same location for 14 years. Open 7 days at the corner of Maddox Drive and 515. North Georgia's favorite Mexican cuisine. El Rey in Ellijay.
What you gonna do with all that junk?
Schottenkirk Ford in Jasper. Highway 515 South, Jasper. SchottenkirkFordJasper.com.